Passover. Hi, everybody. Hi, guys. See Jeff, Mike.
Very interesting backdrop, Rabbi.
It's my Passover, getting ready for Passover backdrop.
You have all your matzah, because I know how much you love it.
I love matzah. I'll take it away. But yeah, we got Passover on the mind right now. We've got lots of Passover happenings. But yeah, I'm gonna take it off. Let people in. Rosemary's not going to be joining us today. She's got a very serious situation at home, as a lot of you know, as we all know. A lot of us aren't on yet, but David is in hospice and in his last days right now. So I saw him last week, and it's very, very imminent, unfortunately. So, but she's making him comfortable. He's at home, you know, he's not in a hospital or anything. So he's had the family come and visit him, and we're going to get them Passover meals this weekend. I'm going to drive out there, and I'm going to hit Dave Stein's house too.
Yeah.
Dave Stein's place. I'm going to drive out to Ventura this week.
Yeah.
Weekend. We're going out to Ventura for Passover. We're delivering. I shouldn't say we're not going out to Passover. We're delivering. We're going to do a delivery out to Ventura County for Santa Paula and for Port Hueneme.
You're not going to deliver to Jeff?
I'm not delivering to Jeff. I am not. We would love to, but we got him a Haggadah.
That's right. Beautiful.
We wanted them to feel like they could celebrate with us. But yeah, we're gonna get out some Passover stuff out there. I just realized my brother-in-law drives out to Port Hueneme every day. He works he's the assistant city manager out in Port Hueneme. So I could have him deliver it. No, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go out to Ventura to make those few deliveries that we've got for people out in Ventura. But yes, I shouldn't say all of Ventura County gets Passover from us, but we have, as of right now, I think we have about 130 now meals that are going out, and tomorrow is the cutoff. And then of course we're also sending the meals through the Meals on Wheels program. Diane, we have Tracy's up in San Jose right now. She just got up there this morning, so she could.
Am I going to see her?
She could have brought you some Passover stuff, but I don't know if it would have traveled well. I don't know if the soup would have traveled.
I'd love to see her. How can I get in touch with her?
She's there for like just till tomorrow, but she's going to all of her accounts, getting them ready for Passover. So she's going up to San Francisco. She started in San Jose, but she's making her way to San Francisco later today. And then we'll be up at the Jewish home in San Francisco. So she's not there for very long in San Jose today, but she did fly in this morning. So yes, unfortunately, this is not one of those trips where she's going to be up there for a long time.
I'm right by the airport. I'm 4 miles.
She's going to be up there just till tomorrow, which is already a problem because we need her down here to help us get ready at home. It's a weird thing when Passover falling on the weekend this year, right after Shabbos too. Doesn't happen a lot, but we go right in from Shabbat into Passover. So we're going to have a lot of preparation to to get through this week. And it just seems so early anyways, because usually it doesn't get much earlier than the last week of March. So we got a lot to do. We have a lot to do this week, putting together the Passover sanders.
Rabbi, can Passover be on Shabbat?
Passover can be any day of the week except for Passover cannot fall on
you mean first Seder, right?
Right.
First Seder, yeah. First Seder can never fall on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday.
Why?
Well,
I understand Friday, but why Monday and Wednesday?
the way we set up the calendar. So we set it up on so it's partly so that so other holidays. So for example, Rosh Hashanah can never start on a Saturday night.
Right.
So the calendars, we have these extra Rosh Chodeshes that we can add that can do that. So by the way, it's one of the reasons why Easter and it's not for this reason, but Easter and Passover can never happen on the same day. So Easter, yeah, it just
isn't it the Sunday after the first moon or something?
Yeah, so it can never happen.
Full moon, yeah.
Which kind of makes sense because it's not supposed to. They're not supposed to be that way because of course Jesus would not, had to have his Passover meal before he was killed, right? So it would have been Thursday night he had his Passover meal, and then Friday, it was Good Friday, he would have been executed, and Sunday he comes back. But that's yeah.
Really, not Friday night, not first night Shabbat.
Let's see.
I thought you could have Seder first night Shabbat and not.
It can start on a Thursday. Well, hold it a second. I'm going to tell you.
It can't start on a Thursday night.
It can't start on a Thursday night. It can't start on the first day can't be on a Thursday.
The first Seder. The first day?
Yeah, the first Seder. No, a Seder can be Friday. A Seder can be Friday night. First day can't. So Seder can't be Thursday. We can't do it on a Thursday. I'll tell you which nights it can't be. Jewish calendar. The first day of Passover can never fall on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday due to a rule in the Hebrew calendar, according to Rambam, Maimonides. The law dictates that Rosh Hashanah can never be on a Saturday night, which would occur if Passover was on a Thursday, which is, again, when it seems to have been when Jesus was actually alive, based on the Christian calendar. The amount of days between Rosh Hashanah, Passover and Rosh Hashanah never changes. This means that Seder can never occur on a Thursday night unless Jesus was in a place where 2 nights of Passover were observed. I guess that's true. So if he was doing a second night Seder, if the Last Supper took place in Jerusalem, then there was no second night. Yeah, that's right. So couldn't have been a second night in Jerusalem. There may be an explanation within the historical context. Perhaps the Last Supper fell on a different day before the church switched the Jewish calendar. So that's why we don't believe that Last Supper really was on a Thursday night. But anyways, so it can't be Thursday night, Sunday night, or Tuesday night. So, but it has to do with again the way Rosh Hashanah also is celebrated, but also it has to do with the fact you can't cook for Passover over you couldn't not cook over Sunday as well. That's one of the issues as well. That's why you can't be on a Monday, because you couldn't have had a day, you couldn't have not cooked on Saturday, all day Saturday, and into Sunday. So that's the issue why it can't be a Monday. The reason it can't be Thursday is because of Rosh Hashanah. I'm not sure why the other date can't be what it is. Anyways, Judith, you're in charge of reading today. As I was telling people before, unfortunately, Rosemary is incapacitated right now. Well, not incapacitated right now. She's attending to David, and David is in hospice and in the last stages of his battle against cancer, and so she's spending waking time with him, all the waking time she has with him right now. So it's a pretty serious situation, and our prayers are with David and with Rosemary right now out in Santa Paula. And
Drop it.
and Judith, you're in charge of reading.
Hang on, dog.
It's my dog.
And Rabbi, it's 4 years today that my mom passed.
Really? Oh man, right before Passover.
Right.
Yeah, I remember. She was at the home on Ventura,
Sure. Yeah, you were there that day.
Woodland Hills. Yeah, it's interesting. We got an interesting greeting about Passover and loss too. It's going to be up on the JLTV Seder. When people have losses around holidays, those become attached to it. We lost my stepfather, Carrie, on Rosh Hashanah. When you have a loss around a holiday, near a holiday, it becomes definitely a part of it. So we have an interesting greeting for JLTV this year. It's from Rosalind Kind, who's better known as Barbara Streisand's younger sister. And she talks about how she lost her mother they lost their mother on Pesach in 2002. Ugh. So she talks about losing that, and she sings a little bit on the. Rosalind's a singer too, so she sings a little bit on the greeting. But yeah, for them, Passover became a time of thinking about their losing their mom. But yeah, that happens to people, and I won't share it right now. I could, but you can wait. You can wait to see it. It's not that compelling, but it's about as close as we got to Barbara Streisand this year for Passover. We would love for her to sing Eliyahu Hanavi, but we have her younger sister singing it. Whatever. That being said, yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on for Passover, and again, we hope everyone in their preparations for Passover has a chance to, in addition to fixing foods and other stuff, get spiritually ready for Passover, which we're definitely going to do today. This section that we are studying today, coincidentally about Amalek, we usually actually read it before Purim, but it goes well with Passover, because in the Torah, it happens right after we leave Egypt. We meet Amalek in chapter 17 of the Torah of Exodus, chapter 17. I'm going to share it up here now. We meet Amalek. We meet the Amalekites, and literally the moment after we're crossing the Sea of Reeds, we get hit with the Amalekites. So of course the rabbis ask the question, why did we get hit right away? The Amalekites, to remind people, Amalek are descendants of Eliphaz. Eliphaz is the oldest son of Esau. So the Amalekites are actually, according to Genesis, the book of Genesis, they're Esau's grandson. They're descendants of Esau. They're Esau's grandsons, which means that they are related to us. They are from the Abrahamic stock, if you will. They are cousins. And that means that they understand us. They maybe speak a language, would have spoke a language similar to us. We don't really know much about Amalek. There are no Amalekites or descendants of Amalekites that genetically we know of, but spiritually we say anyone who wages war against the Jewish people are the Amalekites. We don't really read about any Amalekites after the destruction of the Amalekites by King Saul in the Bible. And he, of course, spares King Agag, the king of the Amalekites. Prophet Samuel comes in and tells Saul, you didn't listen to God. You didn't do what God said. God said to kill everybody. He didn't kill him. He didn't kill King Agag. Samuel does right in front of Saul. He cuts down Agag right in front of him. And as punishment, Saul loses his kingship. Samuel says, you are done. God's going to choose somebody else because you can't follow the rules. So then, of course, King David is picked. We don't know that any other Amalekites survived, but because King Agag is spared, there's a tradition that he was able to impregnate somebody during this period of time, and the Amalekites continue through King Agag. And we hear that Haman is an Agagite. He is a descendant of Agag, that's what it says. He's an Agagite. It doesn't say he's an Amalekite. It says he's an Agagite. Which we assume is a descendant of that King Agag, that same guy that was spared, which means that there is some remnant of the Amalekites that makes it all the way down to the time of Esther, which would have been 800 years later. So are they still there? Are they still around? If you read commentary today, most religious folks will say, even again, the most Orthodox and kind of, I wouldn't say radical, but even the most nationalistic or those who try to find lessons from the modern world directly from the Torah, they'll tell you still Amalekites are spiritual. There's a spiritual connection, and we can be Amalekites. We can be our own worst enemy, and that Amalek is oftentimes in an internal battle rather than an external threat. But there are people who say the Amalekites are any of the nations that go to war against us, whether it's Iran or Hezbollah or Hamas, that they're also Amalek. So we have to be careful because, again, sometimes people will declare somebody an Amalekite. And of course, when we have that, we're supposed to completely destroy the Amalekites. So let's take a look at Amalek today. And it's one of my favorite subjects
Amalek.
for a lot of reasons, because again, this idea of a nemesis or an eternal enemy of the Jewish people is an interesting concept. Any questions or comments before we start? Nobody? Well, let's start, Judith, with Amalek's war against Israel.
As a punishment, because they had not had sufficient faith in God and had doubted whether he could fulfill all their wishes, and had grown negligent in their study of the Torah and in the observance of the laws, God turned Amalek against them during their sojourn in Rephidim, where they had committed these sins. God dealt with them as did that man with his son, whom he bore through the river on his shoulders. What?
Okay. So this is a midrash that explains why did God allow the Amalekites to attack them during this time?
Okay. Whenever the child saw something.
Wait. So this is an analogy. This is an analogy this is an analogy between a father who has his kid on the shoulders and the Israelites. You'll see why.
Whenever the child saw something desirable, he said, "Father, buy it for me." And he fulfilled the child's wish. After the son had in this way received many beautiful things from his father, he called to a passing stranger with these words: "Have you perhaps seen my father?" Then indignantly, the father said to his son, "Oh, you fool, you're sitting on my shoulder. All that you did desire did I procure for you. And now you ask of that man, 'Have you seen my father?'" Thereupon the father threw the child off his shoulder, and a dog came and bit him. So did Israel fare. When they moved out of Egypt, God enveloped them in 7 clouds of glory. They wished for bread, and he gave them manna. They wished for flesh, and he gave them quails. After all their wishes had been granted, they began to doubt, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Then God answered, "You doubt my power so surely as you live? Shall you discover it? The dog will soon bite you." Then came Amalek.
Yep. So it's a really interesting image, an interesting visual that you have to take on, right? If everybody got that. So the Israelites, when they come out of Egypt, they're protected by God. The Sea of Reeds splits. They're given manna. It's an amazing situation, right? Literally, they're given quails. God is giving them anything that they want, like a little kid that's on their dad's shoulders, walking through Disneyland, going, "Hey, I want that. I want that. I want that." And the dad keeps getting the kid something, whatever he looks at.
Veruca Salt.
Yeah, except Veruca Salt is on the shoulders, right? From Willy Wonka, right? So,
Daddy, I want it now.
So the kid can't see the dad because he's on dad's shoulders. So he sees another guy and goes, "Hey, where's my dad? My dad's not here." And so in this analogy, it's like the Israelites don't understand that God's doing everything for them, and then they're asking, "Where's God?" So God says, "Get off," and puts him down. And sure enough, as soon as he gets put down, a dog bites him. And that's Amalek. Now, how do we get, well, you can understand now why they're saying Amalek is there. Why are we now vulnerable? Because we've been taken off God's shoulders. So God's going to give us a chance to be bit to some extent. It's a play, by the way, on Amalek. We don't really know what the word Amalek means. Different theories of construct. It could have just been somebody's name, but I mean, still names mean something or come from something. But some people think it's a combination of the word Am, which means nation or people, and Lakak, which is Judith, where's your dog? Where's my dog? Lakak is to be lapped, licked like a dog. So this is either licks like a dog, Amalek, or lick like a dog, or dog lickers, one or the other. But it also could be from the root malak, which means to wring the neck or to squeeze at the neck, to wring.
I like that much better, wring at the neck, than, I mean, being licked by a dog is alternately lovely and really irritating.
Yep.
But not dangerous.
No. But this is all a play on, especially on that, whether it's Amalek or whichever version of what Amalek is, that's what we're left with. A dog, a nation of essentially dogs who bite us. So, but what's crazy is how are they so effective? How are they so effective at attacking us?
This enemy of Israel bore the name Amalek to denote the rapidity with which he moved against Israel. For like a swarm of locusts, he flew upon them. And the name furthermore designates the purpose of this enemy who came to suck the blood of Israel. This Amalek was a son of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau. And although the descendants of Jacob had been weaker and more insignificant in earlier times, Amalek had left them in peace, for he had excellent reasons to delay his attack. God had revealed to Abraham that his seed would have to serve in the land of the Egyptians, and had put the payment of this debt upon Isaac, and after his death upon Jacob and his descendants. The wicked Amalek now said to himself, if I destroy Jacob and his descendants, God will impose the Egyptian bondage upon me, grandson of Esau, descendant of Abraham. Therefore, he kept himself in restraint as long as Israel dwelt in Egypt, but only after the bondage predicted to the seed of Abraham had been served in full, did he set out to accomplish the war of annihilation against Israel, which his grandfather Esau had enjoined upon him.
Interesting, right? So, lot to unpack there. But first, there's other plays on the name Amalek, that it comes from swarming, or that it comes from cognate of drinking or sucking blood.
Where are you?
But here's the weird thing. Why did Amalek wait till now? Because on one hand, it's like if Esau was trying to destroy us, the Amalekites were trying to destroy us, why wait until we're a nation? They could have attacked us back when we were just a family of 70 people. Why didn't they attack us then? And so the Midrash posits that because Abraham knew about it, right? Abraham's told your descendants will serve in Egypt. All of Abraham's descendants knew that, which means Amalek would know that too. So Amalek's like, well, if we're the chosen people, that means we got to do the serving of time back in Egypt. Let's wait until they're done. And as soon as they're done, then we'll attack them, and then we'll get their blessing. We'll be the blessed people if we destroy them. We'll be the inheritors, if you will, of the blessing. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy idea, but it's an explanation for why they wait until now. Let's get that part of the promise over, and let's get to the good stuff. On the other hand, one could argue the Jews have got a whole lot more on the future that you also would say, let's wait for that to be over before we jump on board. So this is definitely a weird explanation for why they waited until now to attack us, because we were weaker before. So that's one possibility, that they waited until the slavery was done. So it also means, by the way, that Esau's people never gave up their hatred of Jacob. It means that this is a rivalry that predates the Amalekites and goes back to Esau. That this is still about the blessing and the deviation there between Jacob and Esau. So an interesting, it's not really over kind of situation. Didn't necessarily think that would happen, but that's what they get. All right. A little bit more about the Amalekites attacking us now in particular. Why now?
No sooner had he heard of Israel's departure from Egypt than he set out against them and met them by the Red Sea. There indeed he could work them no ill, for Moses uttered against him the ineffable name. And so great was his confusion that he was forced to retreat without affecting his object. Then for some time he tried lying hidden in ambush, and in this wise molesting Israel. But at length he gave up this game of hide and seek, and with a bold front revealed himself as the open enemy of Israel. Not alone, however, did he himself declare war upon Israel, but he also seduced all the heathen nations to assist him in his enterprise against Israel. Although these declined to war upon Israel, fearing that they might have to fare like the Egyptians, they agreed to the following plan of Amalek. He said, follow my expedition. Should Israel conquer me, there will still be plenty of time for you to flee. But should success crown my attempt, should your fate to mine in my undertaking, join your fate to mine in my undertaking against Israel. So Amalek now marched from his settlement in Seir, which was no less than 400 parsangs away from the encampment of the Jews. And although 5 nations, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites had their dwellings between his home and the camp of the Jews, he insisted upon being the first to declare war upon Israel.
Yeah. So this is a little geographic or geography lesson. The realities of how far away the Amalekites would have been if they were in the area opposite Israel and Jordan. Now, they could have come around the bottom, but if they came around through Israel, they would have had to go through those nations. They would have had to go through those Canaanite nations in order to get to the Israelites. So here the Midrash basically says they would have had to ask for permission. They're not the closest people to where they are right now. So they must have gotten permission. They must have gotten help. And here the Amalekites, and the Torah doesn't say they got help, but the Torah here gives us this possibility that they got at least conditional approval, and maybe even the other nations were lying in the back to wait to attack us if this should succeed. This gets to this bigger issue here, which is how, after just defeating the most important, powerful, technologically advanced nation in the world for a very, very, very long time, the Egyptians, how would anybody in their right mind attack Israel right now? How could anybody do this? Like literally the next week, who would do this? It's insane. You can't attack the Israelites after they just defeated the Egyptians. It's insane. None of these other people that we mentioned, they're like a flea compared to the Egyptians. So who does that? And that gets us to this bigger issue, which is that what the Amalekites did was prove to the rest of the world that the Israelites are vulnerable. Even though they just beat the Egyptians, they're still human. They're still beatable. They're still vulnerable. And this was a horrible, horrible thing that happened. What the Amalekites did was immediately prove to people that Israel doesn't always win. Israel can be attacked. Now, I'm not going to ruin the story for you to tell you that we survived this. We survived the Amalekite attack, but people died. People died. Assuming, by the way, that the Torah doesn't tell us that a lot of Israelites died during the plagues. They might have, by the way. There might have been Israelites who died during the plagues. More Israelites die from the Amalekites than died in Egypt during the leaving of Egypt. Not during the whole experience of slavery, but definitely during maybe not during the murder of the Israelite babies, of the Israelite boy babies. I know maybe as many as that, but definitely in the leaving of Egypt, we don't know that a lot of Israelites or any Israelites necessarily died. I mean, we have Midrashim that some Israelites didn't put blood on their doors, and we have some Midrashim that the first plagues affected the Israelites too, but we don't know it. What we do know is that Jews died here in this battle with Amalek at Rephidim, which means that we were vulnerable. The protection that we had when we were up on God's shoulder, so to speak, it's not there anymore, which means that from now on, anybody could attack us. The takeaway from this is that if Amalek hadn't attacked us, then people might have still thought the Israelites were completely invulnerable, that we were literally protected by God. And the Amalekites just knocked that off. They just took the shine off of us by attacking us. All right. And let's read why. Again, we already read that the people were ungrateful, but let's read.
Have people brought that into later trauma that affected the Jews, like the pogroms or like?
Oh yeah, yeah. The blaming of the victim is always there. Now the problem here is the Torah tells us that we messed up. The Torah tells us specifically, as we know, as I pointed out, that immediately after the Red Sea in chapter 16, we say to God, or say to Moses, if only we were back in Egypt where we had food. One of the great scenes. Now we know the Israelites were complaining. I mean, the problem is that yes, it sets the tone for every time we get punished. Well, I don't know. I think we read it already. It says it right away. I mean, look at what it says here in this first paragraph. As a punishment because they had grown not sufficient faith in God and doubted whether he would fulfill all their wishes, and grown negligent in the study of Torah and in the observance of laws. I mean, with all due respect, they don't have the Torah yet. But I mean, look, of course, they say it's God's told them for generations what to do, and they're going to get the hard copy. They didn't know what to do. But gosh, I mean, that is blaming the
victim. Were there times during the writing of the Talmud that there are specific instances referred to in the same way?
Oh yeah, I mean the blaming of the victim continues.
But current events while it's being written.
Yeah. I mean, the most famous one, there's a lot of them, but the most famous one is the one that we often quote, which is that the rabbis say specifically in the Talmud, the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, got destroyed by the Babylonians because of idolatry, because the Jews had descended into idolatry and were behaving like the Canaanites and doing sacrifices like the Canaanites and human sacrifices, and just had become no better than the Canaanites when it came to worship. So the first temple gets destroyed for that. When the second temple gets destroyed by the Romans, the rabbis acknowledge that they didn't do anything religiously wrong, because the sacrifices that they were offering were to the letter of the law, right? So in the temple that was rebuilt, and then rebuilt again, by the way, by King Herod, and made even more beautiful, in that temple, they were doing the sacrifices perfectly. They weren't offering to other gods. They couldn't be flawed for their observance of the letter of the law. So the rabbi said the reason that the second temple was destroyed was not because we were theologically messed up, ritually messed up. It's because we hated each other, because we were internally fighting amongst the Jews. There was what they call sinat chinam. There was unmitigated, like unsubstantiated hatred. There was hatred of one Jew to the other, and that's why the second temple got destroyed, because of civil war amongst the Jews. And that's the rabbis blamed us for the second temple. And according to historical records like Josephus, that was in fact the case. It was true that Jews were killing the other Jews while the temple was being destroyed by the Romans 2,000 years ago. So that, yes, Jews continued this tradition of looking at the current situation and blaming us, which is why we still have Jews that will say that we were responsible for the Holocaust because we had given up our Torah tradition. And that's the tradition of blaming ourselves for our problems that continues. So people can always find a reason to deserve what happens to them, even when it's horrific. So we continue to do that, and people will find reasons for it today. So today it's the same kinds of things. We're not keeping Torah, that there's Jews that are behaving immorally, that we're today in modern Israel, they'll say because there's a culture that celebrates homosexuality, or people will say, there's people who say Israel is not allowed to give up any land to Palestinians that they've won in a war, that's considered to be against God's rules. And if we do that, then we're going to deserve destruction. So there's a whole lot of possibility. There's so many possibilities of what people will hang any Jewish tragedy on that. I can already write you the words that are going to be coming out of the ultra-Orthodox camp if Israel ever loses a war, if Israel ever ceases to exist as a nation. They will blame it on Reform Jews. They'll blame it on homosexuals. They'll blame it on negotiations with Palestinians.
How large a contingent is that?
It's right now, if it happened tomorrow, it would be 10%, 15% of Israel. If it happened, if it really did tragically happen, within a generation, it would be twice that, if not 3 times that. As the trauma, deepens, and as facts, would move away from reality, who knows how in 100 years or 200 years, how that would change. The strange thing about that, if you think about it, and I don't think about it a lot, but I've thought about it, the strange thing, I'm laughing because even as I say it, it kind of worries me and upsets me, is that in that narrative that would be told in the future, I'm on the side that caused it. That's the thing that bugs me when I think about it objectively, is that telling of the story that those Jews were responsible for our destruction. I'm on that side that am responsible for the destruction. So that's the crazy thing, is that
you're not going to change what you believe or behave because
I can't. No, of course not. But it's weird to think that knowing the way history is, and knowing the way things happen, and that change is kind of inevitable, and then unfortunately the roller coaster of history. Granted, if something happened today, for sure. If it happened 200 years from now, I'll have been gone a long time. But if there's still Jews that are practicing Judaism in a non-Orthodox way, we'll still be blamed for it. But that's the world. That's the way that theology always plays things out and runs things. So there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just saying it's ironic that we're reading those stories about those people back then. And, look, we don't know how problematic those Jews who were problematic to the writers of the Talmud really were. We don't know that. It's difficult to know because they're gone. We're the descendants of the people who are keeping it much closer to the way they were supposed to. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is about how that's going to be told or who's going to tell it, but I don't know. I just find it ironic that I'm on the other side of that story, if you will. So anyways, the good news is that we're not there, and let's hope we're not there. Let's hope the rest of the world at least catches up to us so that they don't want this to happen. We get to a point where the world doesn't want all the Jews to be destroyed. They're not helping or aiding Amalek. So let's continue with Amalek.
God punished Israel, who had shown themselves an ungrateful people, by sending against them an enemy that was ungrateful too, never recalling that he owed his life to the sons of Jacob, who had him in their power after their brilliant victory over Esau and his followers.
Yeah, no, that's kind of weird. What brilliant victory did we have over Esau and his followers, right? That's not in the Torah. So again, this is this idea that that Esau's descendants also fought against us later on. In the Midrash, we read about some of the stories in Genesis that Esau is aiding and abetting our enemies, in many places. So we're ungrateful, and we're being attacked by an ungrateful people too, which is Amalek. All right, but here, this is a weird midrash, which probably is based on the way people would do battle in the ancient world. The next couple paragraphs are definitely weird.
In his expedition against Israel, he made use of his kinsmen. Before going over to open attack, he lured many unsuspecting Jews to death by his kindly words. He had fetched from Egypt the table of descent of the Jews, for every Jew had there to mark his name on the bricks produced by him, and these lists lay in the Egyptian archives. Familiar with the names of the different Jewish families, Amalek appeared before the Jewish camp and called the people by name. He invited them to leave the camp and come out to him. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, etc. He would call, "Come out to me, your brother, and transact business with me."
Okay, keep going.
Those who answered the enticing call found certain death at his hands. And not only did Amalek kill them, but he also mutilated their corpses, following the example of his grandsire Esau, by cutting off a certain part of the body and throwing it toward heaven with the mocking words, "Here shalt thou have what thou desirest." In this way did he jeer at the token of the Abrahamic covenant. Nice.
I told you it was weird. I promised you that was weird. That was weird. That is one of the stranger midrashim that you'll read, period, ever, anywhere. For so many reasons. Where to start with this? First of all, so this tells us that Amalek, even before they met us in open field, were trying to pick off our people. How? By setting up shop outside of camp and saying, "Hey guys, come over and do business with us. We've got some great things to trade with you. We got to set up a little, pop-up store." In those days, they were all pop-up stores. But the thing is that Amalek had this little secret. They had the lists of the family records, the table of descent, which is the genealogy reports. So they knew about they knew who the Jews were, and they could call them out and like, "Oh, hey, and it wasn't just, it was like, "Matt, son of Reuben, hey, come on over. We know you."
Early example of identity theft?
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah, except they're using their identity to lure exactly.
Right.
It is identity theft, and they're using it to lure them into business, to make them think that they know them. It's more like fishing, as they fish for them using the information, sending them emails that they've won. They have money from Nigeria coming, so they get them to come out, and then they get them. So this is sick. Now, not only are they killing them, but as you just read, they're mutilating them. And they're mutilating them in such a way that they literally are saying, "God, you want foreskins? Here's the whole thing." That's insane. This is a visual of like horrific proportions here, which kind of, if you think about it, is almost like this is like a nightmare. Is it wrapped in is there a kernel of truth in this? Like, did this really happen? Were there people that the Israelites met in battle that would mutilate them after they killed them, or even before they killed them, by doing this, because they knew that Jews did perform circumcision? Now, look, in today's world, we don't do that doesn't happen because Muslims are also mutilated. So that was a Freudian slip. That Muslims are also practice circumcision, so they're not going to mutilate necessarily a person's, genitalia in order to send a message of, look at you, you circumcising people. But did people do it who were not circumcised? It's probably happened. This is not just a nightmare based on horrible imagination. This is probably something that actually happened. By the way, I never shared this out on Facebook, which is probably good because this is pretty horrific. It's definitely not something I want kids to be thinking about or hearing, because again, this is not something that they talk to kids about, that this scene happened, that the Amalekites did this. But mutilation of corpses definitely has happened in Israel, in some of the battles that Israel has fought with people in Gaza, and unfortunately even in the West Bank, when Israeli soldiers have been captured, they've been mutilated, and it is a nightmare for Israelis to know that if they get captured in Palestinian territories, that this is what they have in store for them. Their bodies will be dragged through the streets, and it happens like now. It's happening. I mean, it hasn't happened in the last couple of years because there haven't been open confrontations and soldiers being left, their bodies being left behind. But it's one of the reasons why Israelis do not leave their fallen comrades behind, because the horrible reality that would happen, they project that on themselves. They wouldn't want to be left behind either. So it still happens to some extent. I mean, it's horrific. And this is again probably a kernel of reality. I'm not a kernel, but something was based on reality. This wasn't just based on imagination. So it does happen. So okay, so as long as from here,
As long as the Jews remained within the encampment, he could, of course, do them no harm, for the cloud enveloped them, and under its shelter they were as well fortified as a city that is surrounded by a solid wall. The cloud, however, covered those only who were pure, but the unclean had to stay beyond it until they were cleansed by a ritual bath, and these Amalek caught and killed. The sinners too, particularly the tribe of Dan, who were all worshippers of idols, were not protected by the cloud, and therefore exposed to the attacks of Amalek.
So the Danites got called out especially for being idol worshipers. So very big warning as far as being on the wrong side of the protection, if you will. So they were protected inside the encampment, where we would march. We'd set up an encampment, right? The different tribes all around the tent of meeting. They don't have the tent of meeting yet, but they are in an encampment together. So, all right, let's read what happens here.
Moses did not himself set out to battle against this dangerous foe of Israel, but he sent his servant Joshua, and for good reasons. Moses knew that only a descendant of Rachel, like the Ephraimite Joshua, could conquer the descendant of Esau. All the sons of Jacob had taken part in the unbrotherly act of selling Joseph as a slave. Hence, none of their descendants might stand up in battle against the descendant of Esau. For they who had themselves acted unnaturally to a brother could hardly hope for God's assistance in a struggle with the unbrotherly Edomites. Only the descendants of Joseph, the man who had been generous and good to his brothers, might hope that God would grant them aid against the unbrotherly descendants of Esau.
Well, hold on. Let's just read that for a second. So in the Torah, it is Joshua that helps lead the battle with Moses against the Amalekites. And why does it have to be Joshua, because he's from the tribe of Ephraim. He is a descendant of Joseph, right? He is he's from the brother. He's not from one of the brothers that tried to kill the other brother. So if you want to have somebody who can stand up and be the right person to lead, it's got to be from that group. Notice, by the way, too, that it doesn't actually call out Joseph. I mean, it's Joseph too, but it actually called out Rachel, the descendant of Rachel, which would also have then also included Benjamin, right? So that would be Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. Those three tribes are descendants of Rachel, and they're descendants of tribes that did not engage in the Joseph being thrown into a pit, because you got Joseph, and then you got Benjamin, who was too young and was not part of that group, had a different mom. So it's Rachel's kids who have a special role to play in this battle and later on as well, because the descendants of Benjamin are also kind of given that special pass because they're not like the other brothers. I mean, look, Judah was one of those other brothers too. He's obviously one of the brothers who actually stood up and didn't want Joseph to be killed, and he gets credit for that, our ancestor Judah. But again, most of the brothers don't, and especially those brothers who are the descendants of Rachel's descendants. Those are the ones who really are kind of like the protectors of you, if you will, the Jewish people. And there's still a midrash that we have that there is a descendant of Joseph who's one of the messiahs. That there has to be a descendant of Joseph who is a Moshiach ben Yosef, if you will, a Joseph descendant. But it's one of the reasons why Esther and Mordechai, who are descendants of Benjamin, are so picked, because they are Rachel's family. They're from the descendants who are not the bad sons. All right. So also, why is Joshua as a descendant of Joseph also good in many other respects? Right here.
Roll. Okay. In other respects, too, Joseph was the opposite of Esau, and his services stood his descendants in good stead in their battles against the descendants of Esau. Esau was the firstborn of his father, but through his evil deeds, he lost his birthright. Joseph, on the other hand, was the youngest of his father's sons, and through his good deeds was he found worthy of enjoying the rights of a firstborn son. Joseph had faith in the resurrection, while Esau denied it. Hence God said, Joseph, the devout, shall be the one to visit merited punishment on Esau, the unbelieving. Joseph associated with two wicked men, Potiphar and Pharaoh, yet he did not follow their example. Esau associated with two pious men, his father and his brother, yet he did not follow their example. Hence, said God, Joseph, who did not follow example of wicked men, shall visit punishment upon him who did not follow the example of pious men. Esau soiled his life with lewdness and murder. Joseph was chaste and shunned bloodshed. Hence, God delivered Esau's descendants into the hands of Joseph's descendants. And as in the course of history, only the descendants of Joseph were victorious over the descendants of Esau. So will it be in the future, at the final reckoning between the angel of Esau and the angels of the Jews. The angel of Reuben will be rebuffed by the angel of Esau with these words, you represent on who had illegal relations with his father's wife. The angels of Shimon and Levi will have to listen to this reproof. You represent people who slew the inhabitants of Shechem. The angel of Judah will be repulsed by the words, Judah had illicit relations with his daughter-in-law. And the angels of the other tribes will be repulsed by Esau's agent when he points out to them that they all took part in selling Joseph. The only one whom he will not be able to repulse will be Joseph's angel, to whom he will be delivered and by whom he will be destroyed. Joseph will be the flame, and Esau the straw burned in the flame.
So there you have. Why does Why does Joseph's descendants battle Esau's descendants? Because Joseph is the opposite of Esau. And they took examples of how Joseph did the opposite of what his uncle, remember, that's his uncle. Esau is Jacob's brother, so it's Joseph's uncle, and he's totally different. I mean, they have the same blood. They have the same. I mean, remember, every one of Esau's descendants, or excuse me, ancestors, every one of Esau's descendants is also Joseph's ancestors. Now, Joseph has other family too, but it's pretty much the same family, right? Because his family's Rachel. His mother's Rachel. I mean, that's the other piece that's added to his genetics, if you will. Because here you have these two, and the rabbis who wrote this midrash understand genetics. They basically say, you've got this guy. Remember, your aunt and uncles, your biological aunts and uncles, they have all the same genetics you do, except you got some other stuff. So what's the other stuff that Joseph has? He's got his mom Rachel, which is why she's mentioned, because she's the only added ingredient that makes him different. And what's interesting is that does make a difference, because all of Jacob's other sons don't do the right thing at some point, including Judah, who we know from the story of Tamar ends up sleeping with his own daughter-in-law and has babies, twin sons with him, grandsons / sons. If you remember that story from Genesis chapter 38, go back and refresh yourself if you want to read that crazy story, that crazy Maury Povich type story. The great thing about these lessons are that Joseph's descendants are uniquely qualified to represent us and to help us, which is why what you just read is a prophetic battle between the Moshiach, the Messiah, descendant of Joseph, and our eternal enemies. That's what we just read. In the future, in the final reckoning, when the final heavenly battle is the apocalypse, whatever you want to call it, the final battle, that final battle, it's Joseph's descendants, it's Joseph's angel, it's Joseph's power that are going to defeat Esau's power. So again, it's this idea that this battle never goes away. And remember, Esau's descendants, according to the rabbis, are the Romans. And then later on, the church that takes over from the Romans, those are Esau's descendants. Esau is both Amalek and to some extent even more than Amalek, because all of Esau's descendants are essentially in battle against us. So that's what you just read. You read a midrash that goes back to this idea of this eternal struggle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness are represented by Jacob on one side and the Jewish people, and Esau's descendants, which include Amalek and any other of these nations that are going to come and get us. So it's more than just they're our nemesis, because remember, technically speaking, they do fulfill that role of nemesis, of again, in the Greek structure, nemesis is the opposite, is the agent of hubris, right? It kicks into gear when people are too proud. That's a little bit here, but this is also more of vindication. And so we get punished, we get saved from punishment by Joseph's actions, by having this one guy be able to stand up and fight for us. So this then sets up Joshua, who is again an Ephraimite. He's from the tribe of Ephraim, which is one of Joseph's tribes, right? Joseph has two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. So Joshua represents those those people. He represents the Joseph tribes. So this is Joshua, who we first kind of see in action here against Amalek. Well, we have Midrash about him, but back in Egypt, but this is the first time we actually see him in the Torah coming out. I mean, this is actually his coming out moment. I don't know, that doesn't sound right, but this is debut of Joshua. Played by, of course, John Derek in the Ten Commandments. There you go. Why did John Derek become more famous for being married to Bo Derek? But he was Joshua in the Ten Commandments.
Bo Derek is a little more famous than Joshua in the Ten Commandments.
I don't know. I think probably because I was from that era. He was a very handsome man in his own right. He was also, of course, married to Linda Evans before he was married to Bo Derek anyways. But of course.
And Linda Evans married Yanni, right?
I think so. Yeah. But she was a very beautiful woman back in the day. It's still a beautiful woman. I mean, she's in
Dynasty.
80s or whatever, but yes, John Derek became more famous for discovering Bo Derek and avoiding statutory rape charges. Anyways, there you go. But here we've got the story of how Amalek met their match in Joshua.
Amalek defeated. Moses now instructed Joshua in regard to his campaign against Amalek, saying, "Choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek." The words "choose us" characterize the modesty of Moses, who treated his disciple Joshua as an equal. In these words, he has taught us that the honor of our disciples should stand as high as our own. Joshua did not at first want to expose himself to danger and leave the protection of the cloud, but Moses said to him, "Abandon the cloud and set forth against Amalek, if ever thou do hope to set the crown upon your head." He commanded him to choose his warriors from among the pious and God-fearing, and promised him that he would set a fast day for the following day and implore God, in behalf of the good deeds of the patriarchs and the wives of the patriarchs, to stand by Israel in this war.
Yep. So this is the setup for what Joshua does. I will point out that it's not just the patriarchs, but it's the matriarchs that also help us when we go out to fight, or at least in this midrash. It's interesting, right? It's not just the zechut, the merit of our patriarchs, but the merit of our matriarchs. They're not called matriarchs here, the wives of the patriarchs, but okay, here we go.
Joshua acted in accordance with these commands and set out against Amalek to conquer whom required not only skillful strategy, but also adeptness in the art of magic. Conquer whom required, Joseph acted in accordance with these commands and said it to.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not just military strategy. You also got to be a wizard.
Conquer whom? Right.
Amalek.
For Amalek was a great magician and knew that propitious and the unpropitious hour of each individual had in this way regulated his attacks against Israel. He attacked that one at night, whose death had been predicted for a night, and him whose death had been preordained for a day, did he attack by day. Yeah, so what he knew is he knew when people were going to die, or at least the time of days that were dangerous for them. It's kind of a little bit like astrology stuff, not necessarily just based on stars, could be based on other types of magic, but knowing the time that someone could die knowing the time that someone is going to die means that at that time every day they are vulnerable. So he knows that. Amalek knows that information, and armed with that information,
he knows your weak time of day, if you will. He knows when you're at your lowest, when your energy flow is at its lowest. I mean, that happens. I mean, people have times of day that they tend to get more tired, and times of day that they are at better strength. A lot of that has to do with how we eat and sleep and those kind of things. But you know, the teaching was that there were times that all of us, and especially that time that we are going to die, if you know that this person's going to die at 3:00 in the afternoon, that's their weak time that they're going to die. So he knew this. All right.
But in this art too, Joshua was his match, for he too knew how to time properly the attack upon individuals. And he destroyed Amalek, his sons, the armies he himself commanded, and those under the leadership of his sons. But in the heat of battle, Joshua treated his enemies humanely. He did not repay like with like. Far was it from him to follow Amalek's example in mutilating the corpses of the enemy. Instead, with a sharp sword, he cut off the enemy's heads, an execution that does not dishonor.
Well, that's nice.
That's nice.
It's a good way to kill somebody. Don't cut off anything other than their heads. It's much better.
Quick and respectful, as it were.
What you take away from that is that's the way you kill somebody, and don't be disrespectful to their bodies. So, okay. So he also had magic, Joshua, but that's not how he won.
No, he won by. But only through the aid of Moses did Joshua win his victory. Moses did not go out into battle, but through his prayer and through his influence upon the people in inspiring them with faith, the battle was won. While the battle raged between Israel and Amalek, Moses was stationed on a height where, supported by the Levite Aaron and the Judean Hur, the representatives of the two noble tribes, Levi and Judah, he fervently implored God's aid.
Okay, so this is in the Torah. So the Torah in Exodus chapter 17 says that Moses watched over the heights, and as long as his hands were up in the air, the Israelites would win, and if they went down, they'd lose. So he had to have people hold up his arms because he couldn't keep them up the whole time. He's got to keep them up. And according to these two guys, Hur and Aaron, his brother, the Levite, and Hur, a Judean from the tribe of Judah, they're the ones who are holding up his arms. So these are, at least, again, of the tribes, they're the more important tribes. They're the ones that, by the way, still exist. The Levites and the Judeans, right? Where that's the majority of Jews are descendants of these people. So they're holding up his arms. So again, even though we heard some bad things about these tribes, they're also obviously pretty good. And they're holding up his arms. This is in the Torah. So now we get into, okay, so what's going on here in this scene? This is where we get a little embellishment.
He said, "O Lord of the world, through me have you brought Israel out of Egypt. Through me have you cleft the sea, and through me have you wrought miracles. So do you now work miracles for me and lend me victory to Israel. For I well know that while all other nations fight only to the 6th hour of the day, this sinful nation stand in battle ranks till sunset." Moses did not consider it sufficient to pray alone to God, but he raised his hands towards heaven as a signal for the whole nation to follow his example and trust in God. As often as he then raised his hands to heaven, and the people prayed with him, trusting that God would lead them to victory, they were indeed victorious. As often, however, as Moses let down his hands and people ceased prayer, weakening in their faith in God, Amalek conquered. But it was hard for Moses constantly to raise his hands. This was God's way of punishing him for being somewhat negligent in the preparations for the war against Amalek. Hence, Aaron and Hur were obliged to hold up his arms and assist him in his prayer. As furthermore, he was unable to stand all the time, he seated himself on a stone, disdaining a soft and comfortable seat, saying, "So long as Israel is in distress, I shall share it with them."
So Moses standing with his or having his arms propped up is it's a pretty powerful image. It's also kind of scary that if Moses's arms fall, that we're going to die, which is kind of a power that it's crazy that that kind of power is in Moses's hands, and that we got to do something to keep his hands up. Otherwise we're going to die. I mean, it's just the power that's going on from that must have been pretty scary. Because it's not easy to keep your hands up for hours and hours and hours. It's just, you just physically can't do it. So the takeaway from this is that this is punishment. That this was them not being ready. This is them not being in a good frame of mind. And this is not just your typical battle either, because the Amalekites don't fight like other people fight. They don't follow the rules of engagement, if you will, which are that there were times of day that you fought, and then when that hour was over, you didn't fight anymore. So did people always follow this? No, Amalek doesn't follow it, but it seems as though that there actually are rules of engagement considered to be like, if you go and fight in another group, that even in the ancient world, there were rules of war, right? And we know that there were rules of war in the Renaissance period and Napoleonic times. If you were an officer and you were captured, you were granted a different level of protection and care while you were in custody. But yeah, there were actually rules of combat, rules of engagement. And one of them is you didn't fight at night, or you didn't fight later in the day, maybe even past noon or in the late afternoon, when things would get hot. People would be too tired and too thirsty. They weren't allowed to fight during that time. So maybe they were only allowed to fight in the morning. But Amalek didn't follow those rules. And so they have to be up all day and all day, even into the evening. So this was not easy. And Moses is going to go to war with them, even though he's not fighting with them. He's going to make himself uncomfortable, if you will. And so instead of sitting on a cushion, he says he sits on a rock. He's on a stone. So he does not take the easy way out, the comforts of a tent watching from far away. So what's happening in this battle?
At evenfall, the battle was not yet decided. Therefore, Moses prayed to God that he might stay the setting of the sun and thus enable Israel to draw the battle to a close. God granted this prayer, for the sun did not set until Israel had completely destroyed their enemy. Thereupon, Moses blessed Joshua with the words, "Someday the sun shall stand still for your sake, as it did today for mine." And this blessing was later fulfilled at Gibeon, when the sun stood still to help Joshua in his battle against the Amorites. Although Amalek...
Well, wait, so we do read about Joshua having the sun stay for him so he could fight a battle against the Canaanites. And this, again, the Amorites. So the Amorites are a Canaanite people. We don't know how long this battle went on for, but it does seem like it went on for a long time. It says until the sun set, and that by itself is a long time. But there's a midrash that it doesn't set when it normally sets. It allowed, the sun stayed up longer went out of its natural order, which we read in the Bible happens in the book of Joshua. It's really the only, if you will, it's really the only miracle that happens in the book of Joshua, which is that the sun doesn't go down and allows Israel to fight a war at Gibeon. So, I mean, the other miracle is the Jordan River parts for Joshua and the people when they cross over. That's a miracle. It's not
And
like
the
Red Sea.
trumpets,
And the
that's not a
trumpets and
miracle.
yeah, I guess you could say that, the walls of Jericho. But it's not the same kinds of stuff as Moses gets, right? But the Midrash did something very clever here, which is it basically ties the miracle of Gibeon, which is, this is a really, I mean, the Jordan River was bigger than it is than it is today. So it's a miracle. It does part. And the walls do fall down, though it does require a sonic connection of the shofar and the people walking around and creating a seismic activity. But it's still a miracle. The walls weren't supposed to come down. God miraculously has that happen. But the miracle that kind of goes back to the plagues miracles, like on that level of, you know, there's no, we didn't do anything. We didn't aid at this in any way, is the sun standing at Gibeon. And so the rabbis here just made a connection that's why it happens, because Joshua fights for Moses here. And at Gibeon, it's going to happen because Moses said it should happen. So it's almost like the reason that miracle happens is because of Moses. So it's kind of a weird, like, you did something for me here, and I'm going to do something for you when I'm gone, and it's going to happen. So it's a little connection in the Torah between them. All right. What actually happens to Amalek in this defeat?
Although Amalek had not received the merited punishment from the hands of Joshua, still his enterprise against Israel had not been entirely unavailing. The miraculous exodus of Israel out of Egypt, and especially the cleaving of the sea, had created such alarm among the heathens that none among them had dared to approach Israel. But this fear vanished as soon as Amalek attempted to compete in battle with Israel. Although he was terribly beaten, still the fear of the inaccessibility of Israel was gone. It was with Amalek as with that foolhardy white who plunged into a scalding hot tub. He scalded himself terribly, yet the tub became cold through his plunge into it. Hence, God was not content with the punishment of Amalek received in the time of Moses, but swore by his throne and by his right hand that he would never forget Amalek's misdeeds, that in this world, as well as in the time of the Messiah, he would visit punishment upon him and would completely exterminate him in the future world. So long as the seed of Amalek exists, the face of God is, as it were, covered, and will only then come to view when the seed of Amalek shall have been entirely exterminated. Well,
Yep. So let's talk about what just happened. I'm not sure, by the way, what the white, why it is a white that has to go into a hot tub. But here's I mean, because a white is a undead. It's the those things from the Game of Thrones, you know, the White Walkers. They're not White Walkers. They're WIGHT.
Wigahit.
Yeah. So that's what they are. But I don't understand why. But it's probably again a fable or a legend about, you know, a spirit that goes into the tub and absorbs the heat Um, that's what Amalek just did. Amalek just got their butts kicked by us. They did. They got beaten. It says so. Exodus chapter 17 says the Amalekites were thoroughly beaten. Not wiped out completely, because of course they're going to be back later on in the book of Samuel in the story of King Saul. But they're chastened, if you will. They're definitely taught a lesson. But the problem, again, as you saw, is they taught us a lesson, and they taught more importantly, they taught the whole world a lesson, which is, again, the other nations were afraid of us after we left Egypt. God was clearly doing miracles for us. And now this little group of people, the Amalekites, attacked us and made everybody else now realize, yeah, you can attack Israel. You can do it. You may not win, but you're doesn't necessarily mean you can't try. And you're gonna cause them death. They're not invulnerable. And so that's what they did that was so bad. The Amalekites now proved Israel to be attackable. And that's why the Amalekites get this final line in the Torah that says in Exodus chapter 17, it says at the end, and we read it every year. We read it every year as a reminder of what happens to, or what should happen to the Amalekites. And I will share it up for you to see, so you know. Whoa, not there. Sorry. Supposed to be sharing this page. Oh, wait. Here it is. Yeah, it's on 2 pages. Right here. Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with the sword. That's pretty much getting your butts kicked. It says, the Lord said to Moses, inscribe this in a document as a reminder and read it out loud to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and named it Adonai Nisi. We're going to get to that in a second. He said it means, upon the throne of the Lord will be up with war, Amalek through the ages. That's a pretty serious punishment. God will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven. So what did they do that was so bad? They proved that anybody can attack us. And so they set the stage for everyone else attacking us in the future. So Judith, did you really find stuff about a white in a bathtub?
So I just texted white spelled that way in a hot tub, in a boiling tub. I said boiling tub. And it said, did you mean water? And I said, no, I meant white. And it started talking about clearing bathtubs. Then I put in a spirit, as in a ghost, and it told me how to make alcohol.
How to make alcohol, and the spirits in the tub. Which, by the way, that leads us to making slivovitz for Passover. That's the way people used to make it, in the bathtub. They would make their slivovitz, their plum brandy, in a bathtub. Well, they still do.
No more of this Passover cooking class. Let's learn how to make slivovitz.
How to make slivovitz. The great thing it will be, of course, that I'll blow myself up on camera while I'm making slivovitz in the bathtub. So that's the nightmare, is that you actually
and get arrested too. Isn't it illegal?
Yeah, yes, I'm sure. Well, I don't know if it's illegal, Judith. I think you're allowed to brew spirits. I just don't.
You can brew beer and make wine. Can you make hard liquor?
Are you not allowed to make? I don't know. I have no idea. I know people do it in the toilets of prison, but I don't know.
That's different. They're already in prison.
They make Pruno in the toilets. Yeah, I don't know. You can get in trouble for it though, by the way. So yeah, I don't know how if you're allowed to, but I know a lot of people do. I'm not a lot of people, but I know there are more than 2 or 3 people that are making brandy in their plum brandy, Slivovitz at their homes.
I think we have to figure out, we need to make our own. I think that's just something we have to do.
Well, I've thought about it. but
Passover tradition.
I don't want to do it in my house. I've talked to some distillers about making Slivovitz, and we've talked about how to do it. Of course, we want to get it with a kosher for Passover seal. But yeah,
You just use vodka like you make flavored vodkas.
Cost a lot of money. We talked about doing those kind of spirits. It is definitely my hobby or dream one day, dream to do it. But of course, it costs money to get kosher for Passover seals. Well, it depends on who you do it through. But if you do it through the larger ones, we'll probably make sure you don't make any money. By the way, the only company that went through kosher certification for their alcohol for Passover, that is the only one. I mean, look, every tequila technically should be kosher for Passover. The only one that actually paid to have it is Patron. So they're making enough money that they could do it. But Patron,
yeah, it was for sale at. I did see the Patron for sale at Cambridge Farms.
There's nothing in vodka that should make it. I mean, in tequila, that should make it. That should make it that way. But Patron are the only ones, and they've only done it for a short period of time. Wait 1 second. I see the. Yep. The only brand. Oh no! According to the VOD of Phoenix, all the Patrons obviously are kosher for Passover, the different levels. But there's also one called never heard of this. Brown Foreman Tequila of Mexico, and also this again is according to Phoenix, but I'll trust them. There's nothing wrong with them. And also Tequila del Señor, and also Productos Finos de Agave is also kosher for Passover. There's a couple. So these the VOD of Phoenix allowed these tequilas as well. So there you go. Just so you know, the Greater Phoenix VOD of Kashrut. Didn't know that there were other ones that other people took us. There's like four other brands that they I don't know enough about tequila. Sorry. All right, so the Amalekites are
no Kraken.
No. Well, rum
Rum's
should be okay. Rum should be okay too, but
do they have any that are labeled or no?
Let's see. I don't know. I don't know if
Important.
I don't know.
The second Pesach in quarantine. I think we need to know.
Oh, it says Bacardi is.
Good to know.
That's what it says. Hold on a second. It should be. We're told. This says we're told. I don't know if that actually is true. Anyways, I'm not sure. I'll look it up. But this one said it is, but I don't know that it is. I'll look it up for you. All righty. So Amalek is being destroyed. What do we learn from this? God, this one.
God bade Moses. Yes.
No, God.
No, sorry. God had at first left the war against Amalek in the hands of his people. Therefore, he bade Joshua, the future leader of the people, never to forget the war against Amalek. And if Moses had listened intently, he would have perceived from this command of God that Joshua was destined to lead the people into the promised land. But later, when Amalek took part in the destruction of Jerusalem, God himself took up the war against Amalek, saying, "By my throne, I vow not to leave a single descendant of Amalek under the heavens. Yea, no one shall even be able to say that his sheep or that whether belonged to an Amalekite."
Wow. This is this idea that we have later on, that even their flocks we had to destroy. This is, again, not really Amalek, but Esau's descendants that do this. But the Amalekites are, the law against them is pretty strong. It's supposed to destroy everything that the Amalekites come in contact with. All right.
God bade Moses impress upon the Jews to repulse no heathen should he desire conversion, but never to accept an Amalekite as a proselyte. It was in consideration of this word of God that David slew the Amalekite who announced to him the death of Saul and Jonathan, for he saw in him only a heathen, although he appeared in the guise of a Jew.
This is pretty weird, because we're never told that anybody can't become a Jew. This Midrash tells us that Amalekites cannot become Jews. So it says, God told Moses that any heathen can become a Jew, but not an Amalekite. So this is a pretty strict rule that would allow for the Amalekites to be completely destroyed, so that no piece of them can ever become reintegrated into the corpus, or the body of the Jews. Pretty strict. The story that they're talking about here is that when King Saul was killed in battle, it was an Amalekite that came and brought David the news. And David punishes the messenger, if you will. Kind of a disturbing scene, because the Amalekite didn't do anything really bad other than, of course, bring the message to David that, that Saul, the guy who had been trying to kill him, had now died, and now he is essentially king. There's a phrase that we still use, don't kill the messenger, right? So what's troubling about this is that there has to be a reason for it. There has to be something that there has to be a justification for what David does. And so
Hey.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, dog challenge.
So the Amalekite gets killed by David because of a different issue, which is that he doesn't trust him. Can't be just that he told David this bad news. So according to kind of our understanding, the Amalekite must have done something else. And the possibility is that he was trying to be a Jew who's trying to blend in, and he's an Amalekite. So what the reading between the lines here is that as Saul is dying, he tells the Amalekite to kill him, and then the Philistines won't be able to take him in battle and humiliate him further. Look, we don't really know. It's kind of a mystery how this Amalekite even got there. And David kills him. And so he kills him because he either is an Amalekite and you're supposed to kill Amalekites, or he killed him because the guy killed King Saul, even though King Saul asked for it. He kills him because he killed King Saul, who is the king. And you can't have the guy who killed the king, even if he asked to be killed, survive. So it's a weird scene, but it's another scene of Amalekites. So here it's connected. And again, the rabbis derive from it that we don't let Amalekites come into our community, because it seems like that Amalekite was part of Saul's retinue. It was part of, he was, allowed to be part of it, but David doesn't see him that way. David only sees him as an Amalekite, kills him. So that's why it says David didn't see him as a heathen. I mean, he saw him as a heathen, but he didn't see him as a good heathen. He sees him as, he calls him out for being an Amalekite and kills him. All right. More about Amalek.
Part of the blame of the destruction of Amalek falls upon his father Eliphaz. He used to say to Amalek, "My son, do you indeed know who will possess this world and the future world?" Amalek paid no attention to his allusion to the future fortune of Israel, and his father urged it no more strongly upon him, although it would have been his duty to instruct his son clearly and fully. He should have said to him, "My son, Israel will possess this world as well as the future world. Dig wells then for their use, and build roads for them, so that you may be judged worthy to share in the future world." But as Amalek had not been sufficiently instructed by his father, in his wantonness, he undertook to destroy the whole world. God, who tries the reins and the heart, said to him, "Oh, thou fool, I created thee after all the 70 nations, but for your sins, thou shalt be the first to descend into hell."
Uh-huh.
Finish it.
So what did we just read? Uh, Amalek is told from an early age that Israel is destined for greatness. And so his dad actually kind of tells him to do the right thing. But because he doesn't tell them, he tells them Israel's destined for greatness. But because he doesn't tell him the second part of that, which is, and you should help him and be part of it, do the right thing and be as close to that as possible. He only instills with him this fear of Israel and this jealousy of Israel. And so it ends up driving him crazy. Amalek, rather than trying to figure out how to be part of that, tries to figure out how to destroy it. And it's an interesting lesson for our own day. Because the people who are not Jewish, who hear messages, oh, the Jewish people are the chosen people, and, you should help them in their, if they're told the second part, you should help them and be close to them, that's a good thing. That's what's happening now for the most part in the Christian world, is you're hearing people being told the Jewish people are the chosen people, and you should be a part of that. You should be close to that. What people used to hear to some extent was the Jewish people are the chosen people, and that's all they were told, which leads people to want to take stuff away from them make people jealous of them, make people want to destroy them, make people say, why them? And so Eliphaz screwed up by only teaching him that first part. We say the first part's okay, but if the first part's not okay, unless you give people some direction. And this is part of what we see in the world today. People who are told that Israel is chosen, or the Jewish people are destined for good things or great things, be a part of it. That's a good thing. People who are not told that second part wind up hating the Jewish people. And that the same countries that are the same places where people are being told today that you should help the Jewish people weren't told that second message up until recently. And that is the difference. I mean, look, I'd rather people be told that the Jewish people are like other people, that, you know, we're good people and bad people. And, you know, I'd rather not have the mythological attached to us, really. I'd rather not have that. It kind of gets to that question is what happens when you have the mythological attached to you? Because people then become, again, they can be spurred to do really, really bad things too. Their reaction might not always be good. It might be bad. So you can see how some people interpret it not in a good way. If they're not told what to do and to do the right thing, they'll do the wrong thing. And it's still relevant. I mean, this is perhaps the most sadly true kind of statement that we read today. All right. Anybody have any questions or want to follow that up with anything? Any thoughts? No. I will tell you one thing that I heard. My dad told me a long time ago, about 20, 25 years ago. My dad became friends with Maximilian Schell, the actor, who was in Judgment at Nuremberg and was from Austria. He was born in Austria, and he was born in the 30s, 20s or 30s. I mean, he was a kid during the war, during World War II. He wasn't Jewish. I mean, he was Christian, or born Christian. And he ended up portraying Nazis and Jews in movies later on. But he told my dad something that my dad never forgot. I remember he was really affected by it. Schell told my dad, he said, you know what it's like when you're raised with these things about the Jews, that they're chosen or that they're better than everybody else, or that they think they're better than everybody else. He says that can really lead to anti-Semitism. He says, when you're told that all the time, and you're not, and again, not given this message but you should be on their side, you end up hating them. And I think it was Schell's explanation for why Austrians had become so anti-Semitic was because for generations, for centuries, they've been taught this kind of weird mythological take on Judaism, which wasn't that you help them. It's that they're the other, or that they're mythically the other, and not a good way. So again, Amalek is the first to go to hell, so to speak, of all the nations. They're the ones who go there first. All right. So the last paragraph here, we're going to finish with this today.
To glorify the victory over Amalek, Moses built an altar, which God called my miracle. For the miracle God wrought against Amalek in the war of Israel was, as it were, a miracle for God. For so long as the Israelites dwell in sorrow, God feels with them, and a joy for Israel is a joy for God. Hence, too, the miraculous victory over Israel's foe was a victory for God.
Right. And that's the Midrash on this name, Adonai Nisi. God, this altar was called Adonai Nisi. Again, it's not necessarily the most obvious the most obvious miracle or important miracle, if you will, that's happened, because it was a hard fought battle. It wasn't like the manna, and it wasn't like the Sea of Reeds parting. There was some blood lost in this miracle. There was a cost in this miracle, but yet Moses saw it as a lesson too, that again, the Israelites, when they suffer, God suffers too. And when Jewish people celebrate and have a joy, God's there too with that. So it's an interesting kind of takeaway from this, that God's with us in both victory and in defeat. So definitely want to have more of the victories, but God's with us in those. And it is an interesting thing to think about, the Amalekites, or the inner Amalek that we face every day. That is perhaps the more interesting one, the internal Amalek, than the external. But this is a story of the external Amalek in the Torah, the actual other nation of the Amalekites. But again, most of us today, we don't have the existential threats, thankfully, that our ancestors did, and even people in more recent generations, but we definitely have the internal one. Next week and in the weeks ahead, we're going to turn to the 10 Commandments. So first we turn to the Amalekite, after the Amalekites, we turn to Yitro, and we turn to Moses' father-in-law. We're going to be reading about Yitro, and as you can see in the next set, the next set of Midrashim, Jethro and the selection of elders or leaders for the people. And then, now that's Jethro rewarded. Then we get to Mount Sinai and the 10 Commandments. So that's on the horizon, folks. We're going to be reading about the 10 Commandments and the law at Mount Sinai. So that's coming up on our next Midrashim, our next, if you will, the next unit. So I think everybody got their orders in for Passover. Please, again, today and tomorrow are the last days to order food and to be part of that. And we hope that everybody has a sweet Passover. If we don't see you before, again, we'll have class. We have class tomorrow night, which we have our Torah study. We'll look at the Torah portion for Passover that we're going to be reading this Saturday. Actually, no, sorry, Tzav. We read this week. We're still before Passover. Next week, we read Passover texts, the Shabbat of Passover. The Shabbat of Passover is, in this case, like the last days of Passover, but we end next weekend. But yeah, this week we have Tzav, because Friday morning and Friday night and Saturday going into that Shabbat, we're reading Tzav. So, but Passover will be here soon. And again, if you have any food that you want to clear out of your house, you can either bring it by the temple or let us know. We're going to have a food pantry donation in the coming days. We're going to collect, probably open up the synagogue. As people are picking up their food, they can drop off chametz and get it to, we'll get it to the food pantry. So we're going to send out an email. We're going to send out an email about that tonight. So please don't just throw your food away. Well, if it's open, throw it away. But if you want to get rid of your bread stuff that's going to go bad or whatever, and it's not open, bring it by the temple and we'll bring it over to the food pantry. They definitely are still in need of food at the food pantry, even during Passover. Don't just bring your matzah when you're done with Passover. We get tons tons of matzah that people get to eat the rest of April. I mean, don't throw it away. I mean, you can
We'll
always-
just bring it to you, Mark, 'cause we know how much you love
Yeah,
matzah.
don't bring.
Does.
Don't-
It's his favorite. He looks forward to it.
Yeah, he does. Everybody that has extra matzah, give to
Yeah, that's
Rabbi.
right. I'm bulking up right now, getting ready for Passover. So if I look by tomorrow, if I look completely blown out, it's because I've been eating bread nonstop.
Bread and
All right,
pasta.
everybody, take care.
Bye.